4. Lewis Goodall is here. His guess is as good as ours. Presenter of Sunday with Lewis Goodall on LBC, and of course the Newsagents podcast as well, which has been keeping us informed daily on all kinds of things, not least this, because it's kind of been dominating
almost
events.
exclusively this.
Almost
really,
exclusively this,
Sheila,
yeah.
Unfortunately.
Including staying up all night for the speech to Congress and regretting it. I heard that one, yeah.
Such a mistake.
So take us back to the tweet he's been putting out today, and we'll talk about what might be in this statement at 4. We'll bring the statement to you live at 4.
Well, of course, he doesn't tweet anymore, Sheila, even with Elon taking over. He truths, as they're called. He puts it on Truth Social, which is, of course, owned by him. And he said, so this is about, an hour or so ago, he said that based on the fact that Russia is absolutely, quotes, pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table right now before it's too late. Thank you! !
When I first read it, I thought he had mistakenly written Russia instead of Ukraine when he was talking about imposing tariffs and banking stuff.
Well, the reason this is significant, or at least maybe it's not significant, but it's certainly different, is that obviously up to now, what has been so notable and, for many people so unfathomable in the Trump approach to the Ukraine-Russia war is that obviously there's been such asymmetry between Russia, between the way that Trump has been treating Russia and Ukraine. The pressure every single day has been extended in one direction, and that is on Zelensky and on Ukraine. Meanwhile, far from exerting pressure, Trump has generally been giving Putin almost everything he wants. He gave him the face-to-face meeting between the negotiators. He's given him parity of esteem between the US and Russia. He's taken away intelligence sharing from Ukraine. Time after time, day after day, he's given Putin what he wants for almost nothing in return. Now this, although I suppose what a skeptic of the Trump strategy might say is that, well, can you be really surprised, Mr. President, that President Putin has continued to, as Trump says, continue to pound Ukraine day after day, when Trump has been removing every element of leverage from Russia and away from Putin and asked for absolutely nothing in return? Indeed, as we know, one of the net consequences of what Trump did in terms of taking away intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians is make the Ukrainians less able to resist and to put countermeasures in place against Russian ballistic and missile attacks onto Ukrainian cities. And we've seen that play out just this week. There may well be people who have died this week in Ukraine
because of that intelligence
of that decision on intelligence. So again, Trump, quixotic and mercurial as ever. I mean, look, this is kind of part of a piece. I mean, Sheila, you and I are paid to try and understand this stuff and to think about this stuff and analyze. And I'm guilty of this more than anybody else. But, there is always a danger of over-intellectualizing Trump. You sort of slightly fall for some of his shtick where you just think, God, there must be some strategy here, right? He must be a few steps ahead, right? You sort of fall for... Very often, as we've seen, let's take tariffs, as we've seen what's happened in the last 24 hours on tariffs. Trump creates these tariffs or says he's going to impose these tariffs on China, on Russia and on Canada and Mexico, sorry. Then he says he's going to pause them. Then he says he's going to reimpose them. And in the last 24 hours, because he's seen what's happened in the stock markets, he said, actually, we won't impose them totally. There are some things we'll give exemptions to. To some extent, Trump is making it up as he goes along. That is always the case with Trump. He has instincts, but he rarely has a kind of comprehensive strategy. And I think that's the same thing with going on here.
The key thing with him, though, from what we've seen before, is he doesn't seem to care when he gets it wrong. He doesn't seem to feel it when he gets it wrong. I mean, he might be hiding what he feels, but most politicians, if they were essentially humiliated by an error, would at least feel it.
I think he does feel it.
Do you?
I do. I think he feels it more than most politicians. You see, I think the thing with the tariffs, for example, is that if Trump really believed it was worth doing tariffs, and he obviously has some attachment to them, he would ride out the negative headlines and he'd ride out the stock turbulence that we've seen. The truth is, what Trump likes to do more than anything else, he loves to dominate. He loves to dominate our phones. He loves to dominate our screens. He loves to dominate the headlines. He doesn't like bad headlines. He really, really doesn't like that. So there are some politicians who are willing to endure turbulence and negative press in order to get to their end goal. Everything we've seen from Trump year after year is very often he's not especially willing to endure that. If he sees something that he doesn't like and he feels he's getting a bad press, he will act on it. And I think that, again, with Ukraine and Russia, look, I suppose what's the best case scenario here? Maybe the best case scenario is that Trump wanted to get into a position of parity in terms of treating the two sides more equally, so he could then respond if he felt one of the sides was being more truculent than the other and impose sanctions or whatever it happens to be. That would be the charitable interpretation. I think the other interpretation might well be if he's genuinely surprised that Putin has not responded to what his strategy has been and to giving him everything that he wants, then frankly, this guy who says he's the master negotiator, the guy who perfected the art of the deal, he really can't be that savvy and that astute, because it was always obvious. People have been saying it all week. Don't take it from me, take it from a defense expert, have been saying all week, Mr. President, you're not asking for anything in return to this stuff. Yeah. So why would Putin give you anything? It's negotiation 101.
And Gordon Brown famously said a long time ago that Putin only responds to strength.
Absolutely.
And Trump has not been showing that to Putin, has he?
He's been showing strength in one direction, as I say, and that is to the Ukrainians and to Zelensky.
Is it possible, I mean, again, we're speculating here, but is it possible that this Oval Office statement that's coming at 4, and we'll bring it to you here on LBC Live, of course, isn't about Ukraine at all? Because he was also tweeting quite furiously and crazily about the Middle East yesterday,
it's completely possible. I think we have to. The thing is, really, is that obviously an Oval Office sort of statement is a little bit less special than perhaps it was during the Biden administration or in previous administrations. You know, Trump likes to be on television all of the time. He tends to do these sort of press events daily now. I mean, what happened with Zelensky and with Trump this time last week, or just after this time last week, last Friday, partly occurred because that was a pool spray that typically doesn't involve any questions, or maybe one question, but of course Trump let it go on for 40 minutes, 50 minutes.
And it normally involves a silent VP if they're there at all.
Absolutely. But as ever with Trump world, so it could be about absolutely any of these things. He was also tweeting about South Africa a little bit earlier on and how they're treating their farmers, perhaps inspired by Elon Musk. But it could be about anything. I mean, some amazing reporting as well, jaw-dropping reporting that people might miss among the maelstrom of stuff in the New York Times today, this afternoon, talking about the relationship between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump and some of the conversations they've been having recently, which said this, that among other things, he brought up all of the other things that he doesn't like about the Canada-US relationship. But the New York Times reporting that Trump told Trudeau that he did not believe in this phone conversation, that the treaty that demarcates the border between the US and Canada, signed in 1908, is invalid. And he wants to, quote, revise the boundary. He offered no further explanation. So here we have the President of America phoning up the Prime Minister of Canada, a country with, by the way, we should remember, our king is their king, saying that he wants to change the border. Now, that sounds a little bit like something we saw in 2022, doesn't it, with Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
Have you seen, on a slightly lighter note, because I feel we need some...
It is Friday.
In the midst of shade.
Although we all remember what happened last Friday, so...
Oh, God. Well, that's true. I went home and the whole world had changed. Have you seen I've been on Instagram seeing cafes in Canada scrubbing out the word Americano.
Canadacado, whatever it's called.
Canadiano.
I mean, it is amazing.
Canadiano coffee.
I mean, it is amazing. There was a poll the other day that showed in Canada that said 74% of Canadians now think that the United States is an enemy. Oof. I mean, extraordinary transformations in
the next
global
sporting
public
event
opinion.
is going to be interesting, isn't it, when they boo the national anthem again. Thank you very much, Lewis Goodall, presenter of Sunday, don't miss it, with Lewis Goodall, on LBC and the Newsagents podcast as well.